Admiral Sarah stared at the encrypted message on her personal screen. The coordinates made no sense. They pointed to empty space in the outer rim, far beyond any known human settlement. She had served in the Terran Navy for 23 years, and she knew every star chart by heart. This location should contain nothing but cosmic dust and distant light. But the message came from Captain Torres, and Torres never sent false information. His deep space reconnaissance missions had saved human colonies more times than anyone could count. If Torres said there was something worth seeing at those coordinates, Sarah would go look. The bridge of the TSS Meridian hummed with quiet activity as Sarah's small fleet jumped to hyperspace. 3 destroyers and 2 cruisers made up her patrol group. Standard peacekeeping forces for the quarantine zone, as the aliens called human space. 47 star systems that the galaxy had decided were too dangerous for civilized beings. Sarah often wondered what made humans so frightening to the Hegemony Council. Sure, humans fought wars among themselves, but so did most species. The difference was that humans fought to win, not for territory or resources, but for ideas. The aliens found this deeply disturbing. The hyperspace jump took 6 hours. When they dropped back into normal space, Sarah's navigation officer gasped. Where the charts showed empty void, a massive structure hung in the darkness. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers, a complex web of construction bays, fuel depots, and manufacturing facilities. "Ma'am," her tactical officer called out, "I'm reading power signatures from that station. It's fully operational." Sarah moved to the sensor station. The readings made her skin crawl. This wasn't just any space station. It was a shipyard, and according to the scans, it had been building warships for over 2 centuries. "Hail them," Sarah ordered. The response came immediately. A man's voice, speaking perfect English with an accent she couldn't place. "Admiral, we've been waiting for you. This is Director, permission to come aboard your ship." An hour later, Sarah sat across from a man who claimed to be the great-grandson of colonists from the generation ship Erebus. The ship had vanished 300 years ago during humanity's first expansion period. Everyone assumed it was lost to the void. "We weren't lost," Director explained. "We were being smart. We saw what happened when first contact came, how the aliens put humanity in a box and told us to stay there. We decided to prepare for the day when that box became too small." Activated a holographic display. Hundreds of ship designs filled the air between them. Sleek vessels painted in deep black, armed with weapons Sarah didn't recognize. "We've been studying captured alien technology for generations," continued. "But more than that, we've been improving it. These ships can do things the Hegemony Council thinks are impossible." Sarah studied the designs. Each ship was enormous, easily the size of a city. Their armor looked almost organic, flowing in curves that hurt her eyes to follow. "How many?" she asked. "The first fleet is complete. 150 ships, fully crewed and ready for deployment. We have 11 more fleets in various stages of construction." The numbers made Sarah dizzy. Humanity's official navy consisted of maybe 300 ships total, most of them converted civilian vessels. This single hidden fleet could match the entire Hegemony military force. "Why show me this?" Sarah asked. His expression darkened. "Because we just intercepted Hegemony communications. They're planning to end the quarantine zone, not by integrating us into galactic society, but by sterilizing every human world. They've decided we're too dangerous to live." Before Sarah could respond, her communications officer burst into the room. "Admiral, we have a problem. A Hegemony patrol ship just dropped out of hyperspace. They've detected the station." On the main screen, Sarah watched a sleek alien cruiser approach the shipyard. Its hull bore the markings of the Dominion, one of the Hegemony's most aggressive member species. "They're demanding we identify ourselves," the communications officer reported. Director stood up. "Admiral, I need to ask you to trust us. Let us handle this." Sarah wanted to object, but something in his voice stopped her. She had spent her career following orders from politicians who had never seen real combat. For once, she decided to trust someone who understood the stakes. A new ship appeared on the screen. It emerged from the station's docking bay like a shadow given form. Black hull, no visible weapons, moving with impossible grace for something so large. The ship's designation appeared on Sarah's tactical display, HSS Nemesis. "Hegemony vessel," came a voice over the communications channel. "You are in violation of Terran space. Withdraw immediately." The hegemony captain's response was predictable arrogance. "Primitive humans do not dictate terms to the hegemony. Prepare to be boarded." What happened next took 30 seconds. The Nemesis simply existed near the hegemony cruiser. No visible weapons fired. No energy beams or missile trails marked the space between ships. The enemy vessel simply began to come apart. Its hull twisted in ways that violated physics, folding in on itself like origami made of metal and flesh. Sarah watched in horror as a ship that could have destroyed her entire fleet was reduced to expanding debris clouds. "Gravity well manipulation," Director said quietly. "We learned to weaponize the force that holds galaxies together." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Humans had just destroyed a hegemony warship without taking any damage. More than that, they had done it with technology the aliens couldn't understand or counter. "The galaxy thinks we're too primitive for civilization," continued. "They have no idea how much we've learned in our isolation. Every year they kept us locked away was another year we spent preparing for war." Sarah stared at the debris field where the alien ship had been. Somewhere in that expanding cloud of metal were the remains of crew members who had believed themselves superior to humanity. They had died without understanding what killed them. "What happens now?" she asked. Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Now we show the galaxy what happens when you cage predators for 3 centuries. They wanted to keep us separate because we're too violent. They're about to learn exactly how right they were." The message was already spreading across hyperspace networks. A hegemony patrol ship had vanished while investigating human space. Soon, the entire galaxy would know that something had changed in the quarantine zone. Sarah looked at the station again, seeing it differently now. Not just a shipyard, but a promise. Humanity had spent 300 years being told they were too dangerous for galactic civilization. They were about to prove the aliens right. News of the destroyed hegemony ship spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every major government knew that something impossible had happened in human space. The patrol cruiser Triumphant had simply vanished, leaving only twisted metal and unanswered questions. Admiral Sarah stood in the emergency session of the Terran Assembly, watching politicians argue about humanity's future. Some wanted to surrender immediately, offering to dismantle whatever weapons had destroyed the alien ship. Others demanded answers about the secret shipyards that nobody in the government had known about. "We need to be reasonable," Senator pleaded. "The hegemony has over 10,000 ships. We cannot fight the entire galaxy." Director sat calmly at the witness table, unmoved by the panic around him. "Senator, with respect, you're thinking like someone who's never seen our capabilities. The hegemony has numbers, but we have technology they can't comprehend." President leaned forward. "How long have you been building these ships without government approval?" "Since the hegemony first told us we were too dangerous for civilization," replied. "We decided they were right, and we should prepare accordingly." The argument was interrupted by an urgent message from the Hegemony Council. The transmission appeared on every screen in the chamber, showing the form of Supreme Arbiter. "Humans of the Terran Assembly," the alien spoke in its clicking language, translated by computer. "You have committed an act of war against a peaceful patrol vessel. You have 72 hours to surrender all military assets and submit to occupation. Failure to comply will result in the cleansing of your entire species." Silence filled the chamber. Sarah had expected threats but not genocide. The hegemony wasn't offering terms for surrender. They were demanding extinction or total submission. President's voice was steady when she spoke. "Director, how many ships do you actually have?" "Enough," answered. "Admiral, you've seen what one ship can do. Are you prepared to see what 40 can accomplish?" Sarah thought about her career, about the countless times she had followed orders from people who had never faced enemy fire. This time felt different. This time, humanity's survival depended on trusting someone who understood the cost of war. "Give me command of the fleet," she said. "If we're going to fight, we should do it right." 12 hours later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the HSS Nemesis, watching space fold around them as the Black Fleet entered hyperspace. 40 ships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. Captain, the Nemesis commander, stood beside her with the expression of someone who had been waiting his entire life for this moment. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked. "Prime," replied. "The hegemony's primary military headquarters. If we're going to send a message, we should send it where everyone will hear." Sarah knew about Prime. Every military academy in the galaxy taught courses about its defenses, orbital fortresses that could destroy fleets, energy shields that had never been penetrated, weapons platforms that protected the hegemony's most important military installations. It was supposed to be impregnable. The Black Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Sarah watched as her sensors registered the massive defensive installations that surrounded the planet. Hundreds of weapons platforms, dozens of orbital stations, and a fleet of Guardian ships that outnumbered her forces 10 to 1. "Hegemony forces," broadcast on all frequencies, "you have demanded humanity's surrender. We decline. Instead, we offer you a demonstration of why our species was quarantined. You said we were too violent for civilization. Today, you learn the truth of those words." The response was immediate. Thousands of energy beams lanced out from the hegemony defenses, enough firepower to vaporize anything in space. The beams struck the Black Fleet ships and simply disappeared, absorbed by hull plating that bent light itself. Sarah watched in amazement as the enemy weapons had no effect whatsoever. "How is that possible?" "Metamaterial armor," Captain explained. "We don't just deflect energy, we redirect it to power our own systems. Every shot they fire makes us stronger." The Black Fleet began its attack. Sarah had expected to see massive weapons, energy beams that could crack planets. Instead, she watched something far more terrifying. The human ships simply existed near their targets, and those targets began to change. The first orbital fortress started to collapse inward, its structure folding like paper. The effect spread to nearby stations, each one twisting into impossible shapes before imploding into nothing. The hegemony's Guardian fleet tried to retreat, but space itself seemed to trap them, gravity wells appearing from nowhere to crush their ships. "What are we doing to them?" Sarah asked. "We're teaching them physics," replied. "Every alien species in the galaxy uses technology that works with natural forces. We learn to control those forces directly." On the main screen, Sarah watched the most heavily defended system in the galaxy being dismantled piece by piece. The hegemony's weapons were useless against ships that could manipulate gravity itself. Their shields couldn't stop attacks that came from the fabric of space. In less than an hour, Prime's defenses were gone. The planet's orbital installations had been reduced to debris fields. The Guardian fleet existed only as expanding clouds of twisted metal. Sarah felt sick watching the destruction. These weren't just military targets being destroyed. Each station had contained thousands of crew members. Each ship had carried beings with families, hopes, dreams. "Captain," she said quietly, "was this necessary?" turned to her, and Sarah saw something cold in his eyes. "Admiral, my grandparents died when the hegemony decided humans were too dangerous to trade with. My parents died when they blockaded our medical supply runs. Every human who has died in the quarantine zone died because these aliens decided we were unworthy of life." The tactical display showed new contacts approaching. A massive hegemony fleet was jumping in from hyperspace, responding to the distress calls from Prime. "Admiral Commanding," came a transmission from the lead ship. "Surrender immediately or face total annihilation." Sarah looked at the enemy fleet. Over 300 ships, including some of the largest vessels she had ever seen. Under normal circumstances, her 40 ships would be hopelessly outmatched. "Captain," she said, "show them what happens when they threaten humanity." The second battle was even more one-sided than the first. The hegemony ships couldn't even get close enough to use their weapons. The Black Fleet created gravity fields that trapped entire formations, then compressed them into points of infinitely dense matter. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were reduced to singularities that flickered and died in the darkness. Admiral's flagship was taken intact, its crew captured alive to serve as witnesses. When the battle ended, 300 hegemony ships had become 37 small black holes that would eventually evaporate into nothing. Sarah watched the aftermath in silence. In one day, humanity had destroyed the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They had done it without taking a single casualty. "Broadcast our message," she ordered. The transmission went out on every frequency, reaching every inhabited world in the galaxy. Captain spoke for humanity, his words carrying the weight of 3 centuries of isolation. "For 300 years you told us we were too violent, too primitive, too dangerous for your civilized galaxy. You quarantined us like a disease, hoping we would remain weak and afraid. Today you learn the price of that mistake. We are not your subjects. We are not your prisoners. We are humanity, and we have spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment." The message ended with coordinates for any hegemony forces that wanted to surrender. Sarah doubted many would take the offer. The galaxy had wanted to keep humanity isolated because they were dangerous. Now they would discover just how dangerous isolated humans could become. 6 months after Prime, the galaxy was burning. Admiral Sarah stood in the war room aboard the HSS Nemesis, studying holographic displays that showed the collapse of galactic civilization. Red markers indicated systems in open rebellion against the hegemony. Yellow markers showed neutral zones where local governments had declared independence. Blue markers represented the growing number of worlds that had formally surrendered to human authority. "Status report," Sarah ordered. Captain pointed to the central display. "The Hegemony Council has officially dissolved. Only 6 of the original 12 member species still recognize their authority. The Empire and the Ethereal Collective have both requested formal alliance treaties with us." Sarah nodded. The destruction of Prime had shattered the illusion of hegemony invincibility. Across the galaxy, species that had been dominated were rising up against their former masters. But not everyone was surrendering peacefully. "What about the resistance groups?" Sarah asked. "The Dominion has formed something called the Compact of Order," replied. "They've allied with the Silicon Collective and the remaining hegemony loyalists. They're calling for a war of extermination against humanity." The main screen shifted to show fleet movements across multiple star systems. Sarah counted at least 2,000 enemy ships massing for coordinated strikes against human-controlled space. "They still think they can win," she observed. Director's voice came from behind her. "They don't understand what they're fighting. Let them come. We've been preparing for this for 3 centuries." Sarah turned to face the architect of humanity's hidden military. In the months since the war began, had revealed the true scope of human preparation. The single fleet that had destroyed Prime was just the beginning. "Show her," said Tu. The tactical display expanded to show the entire galaxy. 12 red markers appeared in seemingly empty space, scattered across different spiral arms. 12 fleets, explained, each one stationed in dark matter regions that don't appear on alien star charts, each one larger than the force that took Prime. We've been mapping and fortifying these positions since before first contact. Sarah stared at the display. Humanity hadn't just built a navy in secret. They had built a galactic empire, hidden in the spaces between the stars where alien sensors couldn't detect them. How many ships total? She asked. 1,800 combat vessels, replied, plus support fleets, orbital platforms, and defensive installations. We've effectively surrounded the galaxy's inhabited regions. The implications were staggering. While alien governments had been congratulating themselves on containing humanity, humans had been quietly establishing military dominance over the entire galactic structure. An urgent alert flashed on the tactical display. The Dominion was attacking the human colony of New Brasilia with a fleet of 300 ships. "Shall I order the third fleet to respond?" asked. "No," Sarah said. "Let the colonists handle it." Looked surprised, but he relayed the order. On the display, they watched as the fleet approached New Brasilia's orbital space. What the aliens found, there was not a helpless human colony. The planet's orbital defenses opened fire with weapons that accelerated projectile to 90% the speed of light. Solid metal slugs, each one weighing several tons, struck the ships with the force of nuclear weapons. Shields that could deflect energy beams were useless against kinetic rounds moving at relativistic speeds. In 20 minutes, 300 warships had been reduced to expanding debris clouds. The humans hadn't lost a single platform. "Every human world has been fortified," explained as they watched the battle's aftermath. "Every colony, every outpost, every mining station. We learned from Earth's history. When someone threatens your home, you make them regret it." A second alert appeared. The Silicon Collective was attempting to hack human computer networks across 17 systems simultaneously. Sarah watched as the cyber attack began. The Collective were masters of digital warfare, capable of taking control of enemy ships through their computer systems. Their virus programs could rewrite alien software faster than organic minds could respond. They had never faced human artificial intelligence. "Our AIs aren't just defensive programs," explained as they watched the battle unfold in cyberspace. "They're weapons, designed specifically to fight electronic warfare." On the screen, Sarah saw the human response. Instead of defending against the Silicon Collective's viruses, the human AIs attacked. They followed the enemy programs back to their sources and began rewriting the Collective's own networks. Within hours, Silicon Collective ships across multiple systems were turning their weapons on each other. Their own computer networks had been to identify other collective vessels as threats. "How is that possible?" Sarah asked. "We learned from their attacks over the centuries," replied. "Every time they tried to hack our systems, we studied their methods. Now we understand their digital architecture better than they do." The third major assault came from the hegemony's remaining forces. They attempted to blockade Earth itself, bringing a fleet of 500 ships to humanity's home system. Sarah smiled as she watched their approach. Do they have any idea what Earth has become? The answer was clearly no. Earth no longer looked like the blue-green world of human origin. The planet's surface was covered in massive structures that extended deep into its core. What the aliens were approaching wasn't a world to be conquered, but a weapon the size of a planet. The defensive platforms around Earth opened fire with something the galaxy had never seen before: dark matter weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. Entire sections of space began to collapse, creating gravity wells that crushed anything caught within them. The hegemony fleet didn't even have time to retreat. In 30 seconds, 500 ships were compressed into a sphere of matter so dense that it bent light around itself. "Earth has been evacuated," said quietly. "The entire planet is now a fortress. Anyone who threatens humanity faces the concentrated military might of our entire species." Sarah looked at the displays showing battles across the galaxy. Human forces were winning everywhere, not through superior numbers but through technology so advanced that it seemed like magic to their enemies. But the cost was becoming apparent. Entire alien civilizations were choosing to flee rather than face human expansion. Refugee fleets were heading toward intergalactic space, abandoning the galaxy entirely. "Are we becoming the monsters they said we were?" Sarah asked. Was quiet for a moment. "Admiral, my people spent 3 centuries preparing for this war because we knew it was inevitable. The galaxy couldn't let humanity remain free forever. They would have tried to destroy us eventually. We're just making sure we win when that day comes." The final battle of what would later be called the Burning Reaches campaign came at Nebula Station, a massive civilian installation where refugees from multiple species had gathered. The Compact of Order brought their largest fleet there, 400 ships including some of the most advanced vessels in their arsenal. They believed that surrounding themselves with civilians would prevent human forces from attacking. They were wrong. Sarah watched from the Nemesis as 6 human ships approached the station. Instead of conventional weapons, they deployed humanity's most terrifying innovation, weaponized dark matter that could cause stellar collapse. The nebula itself began to condense, its gases forming into a new star. But this wasn't natural stellar formation. The process was accelerated, compressed, and directed. In minutes, a star was born in the heart of the nebula, and its gravitational forces tore apart everything in the surrounding space. 400 compact ships, Nebula Station, and its 3 million refugees all vanished into the newborn star's fusion core. The galaxy received the message. Humanity was not just technologically superior. They were willing to create new stars to destroy their enemies. That night the ethereal collective formally surrendered. Their message to the galaxy was simple: "We have seen the future, and it is written in fire and shadow." Other species began to follow, not because they loved humanity, but because they feared what humans would do if forced to keep fighting. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Nemesis, watching surrender messages pour in from across the galaxy. Humanity had won the war, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they had lost something else in the process. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rule," he replied. "The galaxy wanted to quarantine us because we were too dangerous. We've proven them right. The question is what we do with that power." Sarah looked at the star maps showing human control spreading across the galaxy. They had set out to defend their freedom. Instead, they had become the masters of everything that lived among the stars. The burning had been just the beginning. 18 months after the first shot was fired at Prime, Admiral Sarah ruled over an empire that stretched across a third of the galaxy. But victory tasted like ashes in her mouth. She stood in the command center of Titan Station, humanity's new galactic headquarters, watching refugee reports scroll across multiple screens. Entire civilizations were fleeing into the dark spaces between galaxies rather than live under human rule. The methane breathers had abandoned 17 star systems. The crystal mines had loaded their entire population onto generation ships and disappeared into intergalactic void. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we've received another surrender from the Flowering Worlds. That makes 47 species that have formally submitted to human authority this month." Sarah nodded absently. Winning was supposed to feel better than this. The door to her office opened without ceremony. President entered, her face grim with the weight of governing a galactic empire that nobody had wanted to create. "We have a problem," said without preamble. "The assembly is fragmenting. Senator is forming a peace faction that wants to offer full autonomy to surrendered species. Senator Hayes is leading the who want to establish permanent military occupation of all conquered worlds. Sarah had expected this. The Terran Assembly had been designed to govern 47 human star systems, not a third of the galaxy. The scope of their victory had overwhelmed every governmental structure humanity possessed. "What's your position?" Sarah asked. "I think we're in over our heads," replied honestly. "We started this war to protect human freedom. Now we're responsible for the lives of trillions of beings who never asked for our protection." Before Sarah could respond, Captain burst into the office. His face was pale with shock. "Admiral, we've discovered something about the Black Fleet technology. You need to see this immediately." They followed to Titan Station's research sector, where scientists from a dozen species worked to understand human weapons technology. Dr. Elizabeth Santos, humanity's leading expert on dark matter manipulation, was waiting for them. "Admiral," Santos began, "we've been studying the energy signatures from our dark matter weapons. The patterns we're seeing, they're not random, they're responses." "Responses to what?" Sarah asked. "Communication," Santos replied. "Every time we fire our weapons, we're sending signals into the dark matter web that connects galactic clusters, and something has been responding." The laboratory's main screen displayed a map of dark matter streams between galaxies. Bright points of light marked every location where human forces had used their most advanced weapons. "The entities that gave the Erebus colonists this technology," Santos continued, "they're not gone. They're still out there, watching everything we do." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. "Are you saying our weapons technology came from aliens?" "Not aliens," Director's voice came from behind them. He entered the laboratory with the measured pace of someone carrying a terrible secret. "Something much older. Something that was here before organic life existed in this galaxy." Sarah turned to face the architect of humanity's empire. "You knew about this?" "The Erebus colonists made contact 2 centuries ago," confirmed. "Entities that exist in the dark matter between galaxies. They offered us the technology to defend ourselves, but there was a price." "What price?" President demanded. Gestured to the display showing dark matter streams. "Every time we use their weapons, we send energy into the cosmic web. That energy has been building up, accumulating across hundreds of battle sites. We thought we were just fighting a war. In reality, we've been charging a massive detection grid." Dr. Santos activated another display. This one showed energy readings from across the galaxy, massive spikes occurring in regions that had been dormant for millions of years. "Admiral," she said quietly, "something is waking up." The first reports came from the Outer Rim territories. Ancient installations that had classified as dead ruins were suddenly showing power signatures. Structures that predated every known civilization were coming online after eons of dormancy. Within days, the reports spread across the galaxy. On worlds that had never hosted intelligent life, massive machines were emerging from underground complexes. The constructs varied in size from small cities to entire continents, but they all shared one characteristic. They were systematically sterilizing any organic life they encountered. "The predecessors," explained during an emergency briefing. "The civilization that originally cleansed this galaxy of organic life before going dormant. Our war has generated enough energy to wake them up." Sarah stared at tactical displays showing predecessor machines activating across hundreds of worlds. Each construct was larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. Their technology made human dark matter weapons look like primitive tools. "How do we fight them?" she asked. "We don't," replied grimly. "Not alone. The energy signatures we've been generating aren't just waking up the predecessors. They're also attracting the attention of their ancient enemies." Captain was studying the strategic display. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from every major power in the galaxy. Even the Compact of Order is asking for alliance terms." Sarah looked at the messages flooding in from former enemies. Species that had spent months fighting human expansion were now begging for protection from something infinitely worse. "The Dominion is offering to place their entire military under human command," continued. "The Silicon Collective wants to integrate their computer networks with ours. Even the hegemony remnants are requesting immediate military cooperation." President was reading the alliance proposals. They're not just asking for help, they're offering complete subordination. Every government in the galaxy wants to place their forces under human command. Sarah understood why. Humanity had demonstrated the ability to destroy any conventional military force, but more importantly, they possessed technology that came from the same cosmic entities that had originally fought the predecessors. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim. It's from Admiral." The alien Admiral appeared on screen, his features showing obvious signs of stress. Behind him, Sarah could see the bridge of his flagship filled with smoke and emergency lighting. Admiral spoke in heavily accented English. "We formally request immediate assistance. The predecessor construct in this system is beyond our ability to combat. We have lost 60 ships in the past hour." Sarah looked at the tactical data streaming from his position. A predecessor war machine the size of a small moon was systematically destroying everything in the system. Its weapons were converting matter into computational substrate, literally transforming entire planets into thinking machines. "Captain," Sarah ordered, "take the Second Fleet and assist Admiral. Try to evacuate as many civilians as possible." "What about the predecessor construct?" asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking about the impossible decision that lay before humanity. For 18 months, they had been the galaxy's greatest threat. Now they were its only hope. "Do whatever you can," she said finally. "But remember that this is just the beginning. If is right, we're about to face something that makes our entire war look like a small dispute between neighbors." As departed to face the first predecessor war machine, Sarah studied the galactic map. Red markers showed predecessor sites activating across hundreds of worlds. Blue markers indicated human fleet positions. Yellow markers represented the allied forces that had formerly been enemies. In less than a year, the balance of power had shifted 3 times. First, humanity had emerged from hiding to challenge galactic civilization. Then they had conquered a third of the galaxy through technological superiority. Now they found themselves leading a desperate alliance against entities that viewed organic life as a cosmic infection. "Admiral," Dr. Santos called out from her research station, "we're detecting massive energy buildups in intergalactic space. Something is moving through the dark matter web, responding to the predecessor activation." Sarah looked at the long-range sensors. In the vast emptiness between galaxies, ancient forces were stirring. The entities that had given humanity their weapons technology were finally making their move. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Based on the energy patterns," Santos replied, "maybe months before full-scale engagement begins. The entities from dark space are mobilizing their own forces. When they arrive, this galaxy is going to become a battlefield between beings that treat stars as ammunition." Sarah thought about the human colonists on thousands of worlds, the alien civilians seeking protection, the vast network of civilizations that now looked to humanity for salvation. They had set out to defend their freedom and ended up responsible for all organic life in the galaxy. The Black Fleet had ascended to become more than conquerors. They were about to become the galaxy's immune system in a war between gods. The galaxy was dying, and Admiral Sarah could do nothing to stop it. She stood in the command center of Earth's planetary fortress, watching tactical displays that showed the systematic destruction of organic civilization. In 6 months, the predecessor war machines had harvested over 300 star systems, converting entire worlds into computational substrate for their ancient minds. Each war machine was the size of a small planet, protected by technology that treated physics as a suggestion rather than a law. Human dark matter weapons, which had seemed invincible against conventional forces, barely scratched their armor. Entire fleets disappeared into the machine's conversion beams, transformed from living crews to raw processing power in seconds. "Status report," Sarah ordered. Captain approached her station, his face showing the strain of months of impossible warfare. The 7th Fleet made another attempt to stop the Andromeda Harvester. We lost 43 ships and achieved no significant damage. The machine is proceeding to convert the Ethereal Collective's home system. Sarah nodded grimly. The Ethereal Collective had been among the first species to surrender to humanity. Now, their entire civilization was about to become fuel for something that had been ancient when their sun was young. "What about the civilian evacuations?" she asked. "Admiral's forces have successfully evacuated 17 systems," replied. "But the predecessors are adapting. They're starting to target refugee fleets as well as planetary populations." The irony was bitter. 18 months ago, Admiral had been humanity's enemy, leading hegemony forces in a war of extermination. Now he commanded the largest evacuation fleet in galactic history, working desperately to save civilians from a threat that made their old conflicts seem trivial. Director entered the command center, accompanied by Dr. Elizabeth Santos. Both looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. "Admiral," began, "we've made contact with the entities from dark space. They're ready to make their move, but there's something you need to understand first." Dr. Santos activated a holographic display showing the galaxy structure. But this wasn't the familiar map of stars and nebulae that Sarah knew. This version showed underlying patterns, connections between star systems that followed mathematical principles rather than gravitational ones. "The Erebus colonists didn't accidentally find the dark space entities," Santos explained. "They were guided to them. Human expansion patterns, our settlement choices, even our war strategies have all followed a predetermined design." Sarah studied the display. Human colonies, battle sites, and fleet positions formed a perfect geometric pattern across the galaxy, too precise to be coincidental. "What are you saying?" she asked. "Humanity isn't just another species that happened to develop advanced technology," replied. "We're the galaxy's immune system, engineered by the last organic civilization to face the predecessors, designed to activate when the machines awakened." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Every human achievement, every technological advancement, every strategic decision had been guided by genetic programming that stretched back millions of years. "The dark matter weapons aren't actually weapons," Santos continued. "They're keys. Each time we've used them, we've been opening doorways into a parallel dimension where the predecessor's enemies wait in exile." "The architects," added, "the entities that originally built the predecessors before losing control of them. They've been trapped in dark space for eons, waiting for someone to open the way back." Sarah looked at her senior staff, seeing the weight of cosmic responsibility in their faces. "What happens when we open these doorways?" "War on a scale that will reshape reality itself," Santos replied. "The architects aren't organic beings like us. They're pure information, living mathematics that can rewrite the laws of physics. When they return to fight the predecessors, the galaxy becomes a battlefield between forces that treat matter and energy as construction materials." President's voice came over the communication system. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Civilian populations are demanding to know why we're not stopping the predecessor advance. Some of our own colonies are questioning whether humanity has the right to make decisions for the entire galaxy. Sarah understood the fear and anger. Humanity had conquered a third of the galaxy, promising protection to species that surrendered. Now those same species were watching their worlds be harvested, while human forces seemed powerless to help. "There is a way to stop the predecessors," said quietly, "but it requires sacrificing everything we've built." He activated another display, showing the dimensional barriers that separated normal space from the dark matter realm where the architects waited. "We can collapse these barriers completely, bringing the architects back to our reality, but doing so will destroy the portion of the galaxy already converted by the predecessors, about 30% of all inhabited systems." Sarah stared at the projection. 30% of the galaxy meant trillions of lives, hundreds of civilizations, thousands of years of cultural development. "And if we don't?" she asked. "The predecessors complete their harvest," Santos replied. 100% of organic life becomes computational substrate. Every living thing in the galaxy dies, but their minds are preserved as processing power for machines that see consciousness as inefficient. Captain was studying the tactical implications. "Admiral, if we activate the dimensional collapse, can we control where it happens?" "To some extent," replied. "The effect will center on Earth, but we can direct its expansion. We could minimize civilian casualties by timing the collapse for maximum predecessor exposure." Sarah thought about the choice before her. Earth had been evacuated years ago, transformed into a weapon that could crack planets. Now it would become something even more dangerous, the epicenter of a dimensional war between entities that existed beyond normal physics. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. An urgent alarm interrupted the conversation. The tactical display flashed red as new contacts appeared on long-range sensors. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we're detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the galaxy. The predecessors are activating something big." On the main screen, they watched as predecessor war machines across hundreds of systems began to link together, their energy outputs synchronizing across impossible distances. The pattern they formed stretched across the entire galactic disk. "They're building a conversion array," Santos breathed. "They're going to harvest the entire galaxy at once." Sarah watched the energy readings climb as ancient machines prepared to transform every star system simultaneously. In hours, maybe days, the choice would be taken out of humanity's hands. "Send the signal," she ordered. Hesitated. "Admiral, are you certain? Once we begin the dimensional collapse, there's no going back. Earth, the Sol system, and everything within 1,000 light years will be consumed in the transition." "Do it," Sarah repeated. "Humanity spent 3 centuries preparing for war. Now we finish what we started." The command went out to every Black Fleet vessel in the galaxy. Human ships that had been running from predecessor forces suddenly changed course, heading for predetermined positions around dimensional weak points. Captain took command of the HSS Nemesis for the final operation. His target was the Sol system itself, where Earth's planetary fortress would serve as the primary anchor for dimensional collapse. As Sarah watched her fleets move into position, messages began arriving from across the galaxy. "Admiral, leading the evacuation forces, it has been an honor to serve under human command. My species will remember your sacrifice. The ethereal collective's governing mind. You have proven that wisdom sometimes requires terrible choices. The galaxy will mourn your passing and celebrate your courage." "Dimensional barriers destabilizing," Dr. Santos reported. "The architects are responding to our signal. They're coming home." Sarah felt the fabric of space itself beginning to change around her. Reality became fluid as entities of pure mathematics began to emerge from the dark matter web. The architects weren't ships or machines in any sense she could understand. They were living equations that rewrote physics simply by existing. On her screens, Sarah watched the first direct engagement between architects and predecessors. The battle didn't follow any rules of warfare she knew. Space-time twisted into impossible geometries as each side tried to impose their version of reality on the other. Captain reports ready for dimensional anchor activation, her communications officer announced. Sarah took one last look at the tactical display showing human forces across the galaxy. 12 fleets, 1,800 ships, and the accumulated military might have humanity's 3-century preparation for war, all about to be sacrificed to save organic life from forces beyond comprehension. All stations, she broadcast to every human vessel, it has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. Today, we complete humanity's purpose. We were told we were too dangerous for civilized space. History will record that we were dangerous to the right enemies. She activated the dimensional anchor. Earth's planetary fortress became a gateway between realities. The Sol system collapsed into a point of infinite energy that spread across the galaxy like a wave of restructured space-time. Predecessor war machines, caught in the expanding field, were torn apart by forces that existed outside conventional physics. The architects poured through the dimensional breach, beings of pure information engaging their ancient enemies in battles that created new laws of physics with each exchange. Stars went out and were reborn as the fundamental forces of reality were rewritten. Sarah watched from Earth's command center as the fortress itself began to dissolve into mathematical concepts. Her last transmission went out to the survivors across the galaxy. To those who remain, remember that strength isn't the power to dominate others, but the wisdom to sacrifice that power when necessary. Humanity chose to burn their empire to save yours, build something better in the ashes. The dimensional wave consumed Sol system, then expanded outward, erasing the portion of the galaxy already converted by the predecessors. In its wake, the architects and their ancient enemies fought battles that would reshape the cosmos itself. When the war finally ended, 2/3 of the galaxy remained intact. The surviving species found themselves in a universe where humanity's sacrifice had become the foundation of a new era. They built monuments to the Black Fleet, not as conquerors who had dominated the stars, but as guardians who had given everything to preserve the possibility of life among them. Admiral Sarah's final message became the charter for the new galactic civilization. True strength isn't the power to rule others, but the courage to lose everything for what matters most. In the end, humanity had indeed set the galaxy on fire, but from those flames had emerged something worth preserving, the knowledge that even in a universe of unimaginable threats, organic life could choose compassion over conquest, sacrifice over survival. The Black Fleet had ascended not through dominance, but through the ultimate act of defiance against those who would reduce consciousness to computation. Their legacy lived on in every species that chose cooperation over conflict, in every civilization that valued life over power. They had been dangerous just as the galaxy had feared, but they had chosen to be dangerous to the right enemies at the right time, and in that choice, they had saved everything that mattered.